Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today we are returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons, and as always, I'll take a moment to talk about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what we can get today. So for our first roll, we've got an Aristocrat's 50 cal machine gun with replenishing action points with each kill and breaks 50% slower. So the Aristocrat's effect is, in my opinion, probably the best, or at least second best, first star for most cases for full health builds. It is basically 50% damage bonus as long as you have 32,000 caps or more in your inventory. And that's pretty easy to do for a high-level player, unless you're like me, constantly spending your caps on resources to craft things. But for most high-level players who've, learned all the plants that they care about from the vendor bots and things like that, then it's not that hard to keep 32,000 caps on you with a max of 40,000. So that's a good thing. I would say probably anti-armor and junkies both compete with it for full health builds, but it's definitely one of the top tier full health first stars. So that's great on this weapon. The replenishing action points with each kill, I'm not really sure how good it is on this weapon, to be perfectly honest. I will say that if you are looking to use a heavy gun in VATS, the 50 cal is probably one of the better choices if you're going to be using a fully automatic version. There's certainly better choices as far as slower firing weapons, but if you want to use something fully automatic and use VATS with it, the 50 cal is probably one of your better choices. And I do a little bit with that when I'm using 50 cals, but I still, for the most part, just aim down the sights. So, I'm not sure if the replenishing action points with each kill on it is going to be enough to really keep you using VATS almost exclusively with this weapon, but I do feel like it will keep you able to use VATS a lot more frequently with this weapon, if that's what you're looking to do. I don't think most players are, but if that's something you're looking for, that could be good. I still think you'd be better off with something like explosive or faster fire rate or something like that on the second star, but the second star as it is kind of interesting. And then breaking 50% slower, it's not the most powerful of third stars by any means, but it is a very useful one because not having to repair your weapon nearly as often is definitely a good thing. I don't think anybody's really that enthusiastic about having to repair their weapons regularly, so having to do so less is just a good thing. So this one I would actually call on the higher end of mediocre, potentially, depending on what you're looking to do with it. It's definitely no god roll or anything like that, but for the right player, I could see it being very interesting. And even for somebody who didn't really care about the VATS benefit from it, I could still see like a mid-level player using it until they got their hands on something better, just because the first star is very good and the third star is at least useful. So overall, not terrible. It's a good start. Hopefully we can get something better as we go here, but let's see what we get for our next roll. Well, this is not better. We've got a nocturnal Tesla rifle with replenishing action points with each kill and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So I love the Tesla rifles, I really do, but I don't really use mine in VATS, and I'm a self-proclaimed VATS junkie. So I use VATS almost exclusively when I'm using rifles and pistols, but the Tesla rifle is one exception to that. When I break it out, it's because I just kind of want to fire and bounce it off the walls and off the ground and hit as many things as I can, like at Radiation Rumble or in the Daily Ops where the enemies are invisible, things like that. So in those situations, VATS isn't really what I'm looking for, and that's when I break out the Tesla. So the second star replenishing action points with each kill would basically be doing nothing for me, and I suspect it's probably that way for most players who are going to be running a Tesla rifle in any situation. So the second star is kind of dead. The first star, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be because it does not give you the debuff that it used to during the daytime, but unless you're the type of player who will remember to switch weapons based on in-game day and night, which I'm definitely not that kind of player, then the nocturnal effect is just very iffy, because at night the bonus effect from it can be pretty good, but during the day it's just basically a non-legendary, basically no star at all on the first star. So I'm not really a fan of that. And then plus 50 damage resistance while aiming, well, I do sometimes aim my Tesla, and I almost always aim my heavy guns when I'm playing with my heavy gun power armor characters. So that's my normal playstyle. I like to aim down the sights instead of hip firing, but with the Tesla, I tend to just hip fire. So again, it would really do nothing for me if you do aim down the sights with the Tesla, which I could see being potentially useful. Then that is, you know, some free damage resistance. But overall, I think this one is pretty much a dud. So let's stop talking about it and move on to the next one. And here we've got a Mutants Cryolator with replenishing action points with each kill, again, and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Mutants effect is, I'd call it pretty mediocre, because I think most players, at least by the end game, are going to have 5 mutations to get that maximum 25% damage bonus from the Mutants effect. By the time they've got Marsupial, Speed Demon, and either Herbivore or Carnivore, and, you know, probably a couple of other mutations at least that benefit their build. So you're not really giving up anything like you are in a lot of other of the first stars, like Bloodied, where you have to run around at low health, or Junkies, where you need to have addictions, or even Aristocrats, where you have to keep 32,000 caps on you to get the full benefit from it. You're probably already going to be getting it from the Mutants effect, but it's also only 25% bonus damage, which is pretty low. So it's not nothing, and I could see, you know, mid-level players appreciating that effect, but overall, there's just so many better effects that it's kind of outclassed. The replenishing action points with each kill on this weapon, I don't think is going to be very good, because the Cryolator is the kind of weapon that I would normally use outside of VATS, either hip firing or aiming down the sights. I'd probably aim this thing down the sights myself, but, you know, both methods are very viable. If you are the type who would be using it down with VATS, then this particular version could be pretty good for you, because the 25% less VATS AP cost will synergize very well with the replenishing action points with each kill. But really, if you're using the Cryolator, most of the time you're not using it as a main weapon. You're normally using it to slow down bosses or things like that, so that other people at the event can get in some extra damage, like, for example, to keep the Scorchbeast Queen from taking off when she's landed, or going too far when she starts taking off, or whatever. So if you're using it for that, then the second and the third star really aren't doing a whole lot for you. And really the first star is not either. I think for that you'd be best off with probably a quad faster fire rate version of the Cryolator with, I don't know, probably reduced weight so that you can carry it around easily when you're not using it. But that's just my thoughts on the matter. But this one is just not really what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and try again and see what else we get. Okay, now this one is actually kind of interesting. We've got a quad minigun with bolts exploding for area damage and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So the quad effect is actually one of my favorites on certain weapons. Normally I wouldn't think of the minigun as something that I'd really want the quad effect on, because it has a pretty sizable ammo capacity to begin with, and in fact I'm not entirely certain that the quad effect should drop on the minigun, but as you can see, we just got it right here from Murmur. This is definitely no hack. But whether it's intended to or not, I could see it potentially being useful, but really only in maybe boss fights, or if you were going to be just, like, maybe if you were doing the private world where it's just spawning enemies all over the place all the time, then having that kind of an ammo capacity could be useful. But most of the time, its basic ammo capacity is going to be enough, because unlike the core-based weapons like the Gatling Plasma and the Gatling lasers and the Ultrasight Gatling laser that use cores to power them, where if you reload before they're empty, you're just going to end up with a bunch of half-used cores in your inventory. The minigun does not have that issue. You can reload it anytime you want with no issue. So being able to reload it between fights is very easy to do, and there's kind of no reason not to. And so the additional capacity on it is probably lost in most cases. The bolts exploding for area damage is very good. It's probably one of, if not the best, second star in most cases for most weapons, so that's a very good thing. It's just free extra damage, and on a weapon that fires this fast, that's just going to be a lot of extra damage, so that's a great thing. The hits having a chance to generate a stealth field, I'm not really sure how good that is on this weapon. I did have a viewer comment on one of my previous videos that this effect is actually very helpful for them when they're trying to stay in stealth with a flamethrower. So I haven't really tried it with a flamethrower. I've tried it with a couple of different weapons, and I was using stealth weapons with a stealth character, so I didn't see much difference there. So maybe I need to try this again with a louder weapon and see how it does. With the extreme fire rate and the fact that I believe an explosion would also count as a hit to generate a stealth field, it's at least somewhat conceivable that you could end up staying largely in stealth with the quad minigun here. I don't know how effective that would actually be in practice, but overall I would have to definitely classify this weapon as interesting. I don't know if it's good, but it's definitely interesting. So let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got a Stalker's Railway Rifle with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Stalker's effect is, in my opinion, the worst of the first stars at this point in the game, at least for ranged weapons, because as best as I can tell, I won't say it does nothing. It does definitely provide you with some VATS accuracy bonus to attacking enemies when you're not in combat, but it feels more like it's the VATS hits having a plus 50% chance to hit instead of the guaranteed hit that it's supposed to be, because I have definitely missed shots when I was outside of combat in stealth with a Stalker's weapon that I was testing and fired in VATS and missed. So that's not a great thing. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens often enough that I don't consider that effect to really be doing what it says. And then the 50% additional AP cost for that, it does seem to do that. So mostly it's a drawback in my opinion. The VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage is a great effect. It's actually one of my favorite second stars on anything that I would regularly use in VATS, which the Railway Rifle you actually can use in VATS surprisingly. Even the fully automatic version, if you've got a pretty good AP pool, then you'll be able to use it almost exclusively in VATS, although you will run out sometimes. But so being able to use it in VATS means you can get that extra damage from the critical hits, and getting some extra damage from the second star on those critical hits is a great thing, especially considering that the critical hits damage bypasses the 70% damage reduction on the Scorch Beast Queen and so forth. So that makes it a very powerful second star. The VATS critical meter filling 15% faster synergizes very well with that second star, making this a weapon that definitely wants to be used in VATS. And getting your criticals that much faster is never a bad thing. It's just basically more damage. Unfortunately, that first star is really what turned this thing from an interesting weapon into, at least in my opinion, a junk weapon. So let's see what else we can get here. And here we've got a junkie single action revolver with bashing damage increased by 50% and plus 1 perception. So the junkie's effect used to be pretty much the king of the hill for full health builds. First stars aside from anti-armor as far as the best damage dealing first star. But the Aristocrats does the same amount of bonus damage as the Junkie's effect does, and it does not require any addictions, so in many cases I think the Aristocrats is better. Although if you are the type of player who enjoys using chems regularly to buff your character in the game, then choosing your addictions that are to the chems that you use regularly could actually make the Junkie's effect a bit more useful to you than the Aristocrats. Also, if you're the type of player like I am who's constantly spending your caps on resources or whatever just because you need some right away, then the Junkie's effect might be better for you than the Aristocrats effect in that situation. The bashing damage increased by 50% is basically pure crap in almost all situations except for on miniguns. It can be very good on a minigun with the Shredder mod applied and using that thing as a melee weapon, but in pretty much every other situation that second star is just bad. The bashing damage in this game is already very low, so adding 50% to it is just not adding all that much. The plus 1 perception, it's not bad. I don't think anyone's going to complain about getting an extra point to one of their specials, but the primary benefit of Perception is it's going to give you some more VATS accuracy, which is a good thing with this weapon because if you're using pistols, there's a good chance you're going to want to be using them in VATS just to try and get some extra damage because they are a bit underpowered to begin with, so anything you can do to increase their damage output is probably something you're going to be interested in if you're a pistol build. So that's a good thing, but the little bit of bonus of accuracy that you get from one additional perception is not all that exciting, so I think we'd be better off with a better third star than this, but overall I'd call this one pretty mediocre. It's something that I could see some pistol build, mid-level players using until they got something better, but they would definitely be looking hard for something better, I think. So let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. And here we've got a Gormands Fat Man with plus 50% VATS hit chance and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Gormands effect is not very good in my opinion because it gives you a maximum of 24% damage bonus, which I don't really think you're going to miss that 1% as compared to, say, mutants, for example. But the way that you get it is you get 12% damage bonus for having a 100% full hunger bar and a 12% bonus for having a 100% full thirst bar, and that's how you get your 24%. That's not a bad thing in theory, but no matter how diligent you are with keeping your character well fed and well hydrated, those bars are going to deplete at times unless you're just constantly using perfect bubblegum all the time or whatever. So whenever it drops below 100% on either of those bars, your damage bonus is going down. Now, it's probably not such a big deal on something like a Fat Man where the damage is really high to begin with, but, if you're going to use a legendary weapon, why not use one with the best damage bonus that you can get for it if that's what you're looking for in it? And the Gormands effect is not going to give that to you, at least not consistently. Well, definitely not going to give you the best either. So the plus 50% VATS hit chance is kind of interesting on a Fat Man because on the one hand, using VATS and getting some extra chances to, or extra bonus to hit with VATS makes it a lot easier to hit exactly the target you want with your Fat Man, which is probably going to kill most things in one shot, assuming it doesn't bug out. And that's great, but the drawback with that is that at least sometimes when you are using a launcher weapon such as a Fat Man in VATS, if you miss your VAT shot, your projectile might just go off into nothingness and you won't get any of your splash damage from the explosion or anything like that, like you would if you fired down the sights or hip fired it and just happened to miss. So that's a drawback. It's not necessarily a reason not to use this weapon in VATS, but it's something worth being aware of. Although fortunately, the plus 50% VATS hit chance effect means that should happen to you less because your VATS hit chances will be higher. So kind of interesting. I don't know that it's really good on this weapon, but the plus 50 damage resistance while aiming unfortunately does not synergize well with that second star. There is something to be said for having a weapon that's versatile like that, but I prefer to have weapons that are more focused on one playstyle, and then if I want to switch playstyles, I'll just switch weapons. That's the way I think it's better to do it, but, to each their own. The 50 damage resistance while aiming bonus, however, is not terribly exciting, even if you are aiming down the sights a lot, because for one, if you've got damage resistance in the 300 to 400 range, then you're going to be seeing diminishing returns from any bonus to damage resistance that you get. You will see some benefit from it, but it's just going to be less and less the higher it gets. And second of all, it's only damage resistance. It's not energy resistance, not fire resistance, or anything like that. So if your enemies are using laser rifles on you, then it's doing absolutely nothing. So overall, I'd much rather see a third star like 90% reduced weight on a Fat Man because you are typically not going to be using a Fat Man as your primary weapon. It's typically the kind of weapon that you would maybe keep in your inventory for when you find yourself with those nukes, say for example after running a nuke silo, and you just want to get them out of your inventory without dropping them. You just kind of want to shoot them at something and have some fun doing that. Well, having a 90% reduced weight one would be great for that, but that's not this one. So overall, I'm thinking this one's a dud. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Zealots cryolator with 25% faster fire rate and 15% faster reload. So the Zealots effect is, I don't know, I'd say it probably is kind of middling as far as the Slayer's effects go overall. It's not the worst just because it affects Scorch Beasts and Scorch Beast Queens, so getting some extra damage on them is a good thing and something that you're likely to be doing at least from time to time. I don't know that it's worth keeping a specific weapon around for that. I think you'd be better off with a good all-around weapon that does well against them as well, but I could see some builds appreciating the Zealots effect. But as we talked about earlier on the cryolator, I really think quad is the best effect for the first star on a cryolator, which is unfortunate because the second star would be perfect here if it was a quad cryolator with 25% faster fire rate. It does mean that you are going to have a lot easier time keeping things slowed down and frozen, which is great, but you're also going to burn through your ammo capacity that much faster. So that's why I like the quad on the cryolators. And then the 50% faster reload, well, in theory, it should help keep you firing your cryolator more frequently, or at least as close to as much as you would with without the 25% faster fire rate. But in reality, its benefit is, I won't say it's non-existent, but it's definitely less than what you would expect if you're running the speed demon mutation. So that's kind of a drawback. It's not nothing, but it's not as good as I had been thinking that it was. So overall, this one's kind of interesting. I could see somebody wanting to keep this one around for Scorpius Queen fights or something, but overall, I think there's better ones out there, so let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Gormands Pipe bolt-action pistol with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So we had this exact loadout on a weapon earlier. I don't remember which weapon it was, but maybe the first star was different. But overall, the Gormands effect is still pretty unexciting on this weapon as well as it is on the weapon we saw it on earlier. This weapon, however, is a very good weapon for the VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster, just because it fires very slowly. So you really want to maximize your damage per shot and try to get as many one-shot kills as possible. So to do that, you're probably going to be using, or not necessarily probably, but there's a good chance that you'll be wanting to use VATS to target the weak points, as well as getting some extra damage from those VATS criticals, and getting those criticals faster because you're not firing extremely quickly to build up your critical meter is a good thing. And then the VATS critical hits doing extra damage will get you more of those one-shot kills. So I don't think this weapon is all that good, but it's at least synergizes relatively well, and I could see a lower level player using it until they got something better, but really this is definitely not the ideal weapon. And we've got one more here, so let's see what else we can get. And hey, we got an alien disintegrator. That's kind of interesting. And a half-decent one, actually. We got a Junkies alien disintegrator with plus 50% VATS hit chance and breaks 50% slower. So we talked about the Junkies effect. It's not quite as good as the Aristocrats effect, at least in my opinion, for full health builds, unless you're going to be running around using chems to buff your character regularly, in which case it could be, or if you have struggled to keep 32,000 caps on your person, like I tend to. But the damage bonus is the same. They're both plus 50% base damage. And then the plus 50% VATS hit chance is actually very good on a weapon like this that you can use almost exclusively in VATS. Plus, this weapon is actually naturally suppressed, which is a very nice thing. So you can even use stealth with this weapon, even though there's no suppressor mod for it. And then the breaking 50% slower, well, that's a great effect. Well, it's not that great of an effect, but it's a solid effect at least on this, because, as I said before, nobody likes repairing their weapons, really, I don't think. Maybe there's somebody out there who really enjoys it, but I don't think most of us do. And so having to do so less is a good thing. So this is probably the best one we got today, although I will say that this quad minigun is interesting. I may have to take this thing out for a spin at some point, maybe do a weapon spotlight video on it or something, just because it is kind of interesting. So anyway, we didn't get any god rolls, but we did at least get some interesting weapons today, which is better than we've done on the last couple of tries. So thank you for that, Murmur. And yeah, I appreciate you tuning in. Please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.